it's Kimoni here. Welcome back to my channel. Get comfy, get cozy because today we're going to discuss a recent five-star read that I've had the joy of being able to read, engage with, and to really learn from, to be honest. And that book is called The Secret Diaries of Charles Ignatius Sancho by Paterson Joseph. And in this video, I really want to discuss what made this book so great, why you should read it, and overall, like, why this is such a compelling and captivating story. So, what makes this book so captivating, you might ask? Well, firstly, the way Paterson describes and creates the setting in which Sancho is living in. I feel like London and its beauty and yet destitution is really described, and it's all in parallel. You will have moments where like you'll see joy in the city, you'll see community, you'll see like so many wonders in the city told from Sancho's perspective, but at the same time you'll see like horrible things happen. You'll see poverty, you'll see destitution, you'll see you'll see people struggle in the background of all this greatness that London is. And I feel like it really does reflect like that the city of London, it was great and it was built to be great, but it was only built to be great for a certain few people, and for the rest of the people, including Sancho, who's excluded from this circle of like benefits, it means that even though he can see like the beauty and wonder of the city, he is directly like he is prevented from being able to benefit from those or like enjoy the city and all it has to offer. For example, there was a law in Britain at the time preventing preventing people from employing black people in the city of London. And Sancho describes, not only from a perspective of like, oh, how like unfortunate I can't get a job, he is genuinely struggling, but also from a sense of I want to do this, I want to pursue this career, you know, a very normal human thing. And yet, in the backdrop of the world he lives in, it is unfortunately unattainable. I would also like to highlight a really key part of the story. A lot of where you see the most joy in London is in the pubs and in the bars and in the nooks of cranny of London, and I feel like that represents a really a really cultural significant place in Britain. Is that a lot of the time the pub is a place for people to like socialize, for people to bond, for people to come together, both whites and blacks and from other ethnic groups. The pub has always been a place where people could come together, ignore like what was happening out in the real world, and just like bond over like their common struggle. And you see that a lot in this story, with Sancho meeting a lot of his peers and his friends who are white, but being able to socialize with them as normal in the pub. Another thing as well is that the story at some point really points into like Black Britain, or like looks at the black populace and like the pockets of joy within the city where you can find black people like socializing, trying to live out their freedom, their lives in these nooks and crannies of London. There's a point to the story where like Sancho he visits this like bar that is specifically designated towards black people, and he comments on how much like despite the destitution, despite the lack of freedom, despite all the struggles and hardships that come with being black in Britain, with being black in this period of time where colonialism and the slave trade were rife, he comments on how like joyful he had never seen the people like dance and sing like that, how free they seemed despite like the external bondage that they were in. And that was a really nice like scene to behold, because it shows like black empowerment during this time, and that's reflected in like the scene and the setting which Patterson so thoroughly describes. It almost feels like you're in that sort of like you're in that dance, you're in that like music, you're along with these characters just feeling that sentimental joy, which feels good at the time, but it's also like really sad because it feels fleeting, because you know tomorrow morning you're gonna have to wake up, you're not going to be in these nooks and crannies, you're going to have to engage with the real world, which constantly has something against you. And so I feel like Patterson's description of the world around him and the world building that really happened alongside the story and monologue of Sancho really helps like elevate the story and make you feel immersed in the story, because I do feel like the setting and the places that you're in tend to make you tend to like reflect like the general mood or how you're supposed to feel in that moment. Another writing choice which Joseph made, which I feel like really elevates the story, is having it written via the first person, via like Sancho's voice, and being having access to his like inner monologue. And I feel like this does two things. One, it humanizes him, and I feel like this is something that can often not be given to like historical figures, especially those that are not as like as well known. I feel like when it there's a tendency when it comes to like historical figures to sort of like sensationalize them and make them seem as if they were special, when in fact they were just people who said, I want to do something about the situation I'm in, and that's what Sancho is in. Be having access By having access to his like inner monologue, being able to hear his inner thoughts, you get like a real like you start to form a really deep connection with him. I feel like that's especially important for like readers who don't really have any connection to like the background of like um Sancho in like slavery or like colonialism and stuff like that. I feel like it's really important that by telling it by the first person, we get to like really like get to know him personally in a way that you wouldn't be able to get if it was told like in a more like biographic style or via the third person. We get to see thoughts that I was actually shocked about how much I could relate to Sancho, because even though I'm black, I felt like a lot of the struggles he would have faced with would have like really like contrasted with the struggles that I face with today. But there were some things which like I could see parallels with. For example, he often talks about how he feels so isolated and so different from like his fellow African. And that is because Sancho acts white, he is educated, he's well spoken, and those are traits that are typically associated with whiteness. And so he talks about how sometimes when he's around his like black brethren, he really does feel like out of place or like really different. And I know a lot of black people who feel the same way if they don't if they don't like fit the typical image of what it means to be black, they can feel like sort of like isolated from the community. And so hearing those thoughts like echoed in his story, I felt like again made him more relatable, made it more personal. And I do also think that in the specific context of like slavery, colonialism, black British history, so much of it has been written by people who weren't like impacted by the events that happened. And so having the story like told by him as opposed to like having the story framed told by someone else, I think gives like Sancho like the sense of like authority or power over his own story narratively, that I feel like Joseph does really well. And then thirdly, I think the choice to include like letters and like reflective pieces also made the story way more like captivating and more interesting, because let's focus on the letters first. There's this huge segment like in the middle of the story where it's just letters between Sancho and his future wife to be, Anne. And like I feel like it opens up the world to like a new sort of story, because if the narrative solely focused on Sancho, it would have just been his story, his struggles, and what he's seen in life. But through the letters, we're able to see what it was like for black people, in the Caribbean, and to hear their stories. Even though it's not like via the first person, you get to see like the struggles of people in the Caribbean, on the plantations, the actual slaves working on the fields. And I also feel like the letters offer sort of like almost like reflect like the powerlessness that Sancho and a lot of other black people around them feel about their situation. They can only weep and mourn what has been lost, what has been stolen, what has been done to them and the people around them, and yet they are effectively powerless, or they not powerless in per se, but like they feel like destitute, like they can't do anything about their situation, because how can they when their hands are tied? And knowing that like you need to give up so much to keep yourself safe. I feel like that was really reflected in these letters between them. And also hearing the stories of like people on the plantations alongside Sancho's view on it, hearing about them and his emotional connection to them really showed like this like global struggle that I feel like a lot of like Africans may have felt at the time of the story. This like feeling of like, okay, I can't help you, and we're distances apart, we're miles apart, we're sea apart, but like I still feel your struggle and I still pray for you every day. And so I feel like those letters were a really great way of broadening the world, of introducing a dialogue between two characters, an emotional dialogue and connection, and showing like the general struggles of black people across the world during the Georgian era and eras to come. And then I also think like the choice by Joseph to do like reflect, to have this be a reflective piece. There are snippets at like the beginning of every single chapter where like Sancho is like talking to his son Billy, because essentially like the idea of this book or this like series of letters and diary entries is that he's going to give it to his son Billy to be kept within the family. I personally felt that premise, I feel like that premise was really like, it really hit me, can't lie, because I feel like again so much of the stories of slaves, of black people who lived within this like slavery colonial era, like their stories, they didn't have the opportunity to pass down their stories have been forgotten. So knowing that Sancho is trying to like leave behind something for his son to then pass on to the next generation, I felt like was really like, I feel like it gave justice to the stories of slaves from that period. And I also thought the reflective pieces were really good because it sort of gave like, again, it humanized Sancho even more because he gets to reflect on his past, his struggles. And even though, yes, a lot of the book is based on his struggles, he also finds joy, he finds love, and he finds connection through those struggles. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about this book is that, oh my gosh, I felt like crying so many times during this book because you see so much happen. You see so many distressing things happening. Well, not see, you read so many distressing things happening, and yet you can still see these characters. They get up, they keep on going with life, and they keep on striving for something better for themselves, because when you're in that situation, what more can you do, you know? But yeah, those are my thoughts on The Secret Diaries of Charles Ignatius Sancho by Paterson Joseph. I would highly recommend. It's a 5-star read. If you want to like, if you're interested in historical fiction, if you're interested in Black British history, or if you're interested in like just really emotional, like really character driven emotional stories, I would definitely recommend this book. It's a brilliant read, and I really hope that you try and like at some point like pick it up. Like I said, it's a fantastic read, something that I feel like all of you would enjoy. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, you know, comment your thoughts if you've read the book, or if you are going to read the book, do let me know. And yeah, I'm going to log off now. Bye.